Becca, you're still as unthoughtful and worthless as always. This trip was something my son and I were looking forward to. You, who have no part in this, can go home right away." My mother-in-law started nagging me the moment my husband left the table. We were on an overseas trip that my husband had asked me to plan. If she feels that strongly about it, I'll go home. What happens to the two of them after that isn't my concern. My name is Becca, and I work for a multinational corporation. Since my job has a flexible schedule, I've been working mostly remotely since I got married. This means I spend a lot of time at home. My husband Jack loves to present himself well and is quite the big spender. Unfortunately, he has never contributed financially to our household. I didn't see this side of him when we were dating, but after we got married and started living together, his true nature gradually emerged. His mother seems to enjoy bragging about her son. I've heard of mothers who dote on their sons. I was prepared for that to some extent and was willing to tolerate it, but she is obstinate and strong-willed. She doesn't listen to other people's opinions. She even completely ignores her husband's opinions because she believes that her son is the best. She doesn't like me at all. Every time we meet, she always has some snide remark. She seems to particularly dislike the fact that I live comfortably on my son's salary alone. She keeps nagging me, saying, "You're still young. You should work outside." I've explained many times that I continue to work after marriage and that I have a job that I can do from home, but in her mind, working from home is just a part-time job. She assumes that I'm just pretending to work by always looking at my computer. She presumes that I'm probably playing games. Apparently, I'm a worthless wife who doesn't do housework properly and only plays computer games despite being a stay-at-home wife. My husband, of course, understands my work style, but he has never explained it to his mother. Even when it's said right in front of him, he turns a blind eye. Even when I asked him to explain it well, he says he wants us women to handle it and completely throws it at me. He even says he doesn't want to get involved in troubles. Once, when I persistently asked him to do something similar, he threw a completed divorce paper at me. It urged me to be treated like that, but I thought about divorcing him. However, I heard that getting a divorce is more difficult than getting married. It would be a problem if it were more difficult than the current situation, so I ended up giving in to my husband's argument. I understood that my husband prioritizes his mother in everything. It's frustrating, but I feel like I need to find a way to deal with her while skillfully deflecting her. I didn't agree to divorce because of this change in my feelings, but it seems that my husband thinks I'm head over heels for him and didn't want to break up. His pompous attitude is getting worse day by day. It's cute when a child tries to act grown up, but when an adult does it, it's rather a turn-off. I've learned to ignore his pompous words and act as if I haven't seen his actions. There is another reason why I didn't divorce him. Due to my husband's job, we live quite a distance from my in-laws. We meet once a year or at most twice a year. I thought I could tolerate that much. While the world was making a fuss about having 9 consecutive days off if you take a vacation on weekdays, both my husband and I were working. In my case, American holidays don't matter much because I adjust my schedule according to international circumstances. As for my husband, it's just that he wasn't taking 9 consecutive days off according to the calendar. When he returned home after his first day back at work, he announced, "Let's go on an overseas trip." When I asked him what he was talking about, he said that his colleagues had taken a vacation and made it a 9-day holiday to go on an overseas trip, and he was quite proud of it, which made him incredibly annoyed and regretful. I was dumbfounded by his childishness, but I haven't been on a trip this year, so I suggested a domestic trip. The reason being my husband has no experience with overseas trips, so if we were to go overseas, he would have to apply for a passport. "There won't be a problem if you're with me. You're fluent in multiple languages," he said. "I studied abroad when I was a student and had been on many overseas trips when I was single. In addition to English, I can hold a conversation in Spanish, and a bit of Chinese if necessary. When my mother back home got hooked on Korean dramas, I studied Korean with her. However, I didn't get much opportunity to use it, so I'm not very confident. Sure, compared to my husband, I might be good at languages, but that doesn't mean that applying for passports will be finished in a snap. I tried to persuade him to go abroad during the summer or winter, but he wouldn't listen at all. On the contrary, despite having no experience, he decided on the country to visit, took leave without permission, and told me to make it work on the schedule. "It's not a tour. Why should I have to act with strangers?" he declared. Furthermore, he stated that English is a universal language and that we should have no problem if it's just the two of us. I thought maybe it's fine, but before I knew it, he said, "That's right, I promised to take Mom along. I'll count on you for that too." Your mother-in-law too. Even for me, taking care of two inexperienced people abroad is too much. You should show some filial piety once in a while. Maybe you can gain some favor by doing so. Our kind and good husband, this is for your own good, Becca. You should be grateful. He said things that made it seem like he was doing me a favor, but arguing against it started to seem foolish. I decided to quietly make reservations as my husband instructed, and I came up with another good idea. Starting from applying for my mother-in-law and husband's passports, booking flights and hotel reservations, it was a lot of trouble, but in order to implement my idea, I patiently fulfilled all my husband's wishes and created a perfect schedule. On the day of the overseas trip, my mother-in-law, who knows nothing of my troubles, cheerfully and childishly exclaimed, just as I expected from my son, "It's a long journey overseas. The seats are business class, aren't they?" Knowing my husband, he probably said something like, "I'll take you there." He probably bragged about himself, saying things like, "I made the reservations and I planned the schedule." The truth is, I did everything and my husband did nothing. They did nothing and left all the procedures to me. What's more, the two of them, who have hardly any experience with airports, moved around on their own while I was doing the procedures, walked around aimlessly even when it was boarding time, and I had a hard time finding them. The airport staff even asked, "Would you like us to make a call announcement?" "It's Becca's fault for not telling us the boarding gate," they said. It was such a fuss, but they showed no remorse, saying, "And this wife was planning to have fun by herself, leaving us behind." During the flight, they behaved relatively quietly, but it was honestly annoying and embarrassing every time they called a flight attendant. Several hours later, we arrived in the destination country. After finishing immigration procedures and such, just when I thought I could finally head straight to the hotel and take a break, my husband turned pale and said, "I'm going to the bathroom," entrusted his luggage to me, and ran away. I don't understand why only my husband got sick when we ate the same thing. He had been grinning and calling his favorite flight attendant. I guess this is his divine punishment. Serves him right. "Becca, you really are an inconsiderate daughter-in-law. How long are you planning to stay here?" This trip my son planned it for me. It's a mother-son trip without the need for a daughter-in-law. You're a money grabber who doesn't even work. How brazen of you to think you can enjoy this trip for free. Go home now. Are you sure? Whether it's good or bad, I can't have fun when you're here. I see that's not good. All right then, I'll go home now. I handed my husband's luggage back to my mother-in-law, only taking my carry-on and turned my back to her. My mother-in-law, who received my husband's luggage, was stunned and had a very vacant expression on her face. It's not possible for her to react like that when she told me to go home. I was doing my best to hold back my laughter. My husband seemed to have been going in and out of the bathroom several times, so we didn't cross paths. Luckily, I was able to get a ticket back to America, so I became a passenger on the plane headed there. Originally, I had planned to find a chance to return home alone. If we had a good relationship, I wouldn't mind being taken around as a tour guide, but not with that mother and son. It's only stressful for me, and I will gain nothing. I can't stop grinning just thinking about what the two of them, who can't speak anything but English, will do when they are left behind. If they think a little, they should be able to manage with the translation function of their smartphone app. But I can't imagine my husband, who likes to show off and inflate his own importance, doing something like that. When I safely returned back after making a few detours, I headed straight to the luxury hotel where my parents were waiting. My husband Jack told me to show respect for my parents, so I treated them to a luxury trip in upstate New York. They were to travel there leisurely on a popular scenic route, enjoying the scenery and meals along the way. I managed to meet up with them earlier than planned, much to their surprise. When I briefly explained the situation, they were taken aback. They were astounded that I had agreed to such a request from Jack. My phone was flooded with calls and messages from Jack, but I ignored them all. I turned off my phone and fully enjoyed my time away. After partying with my parents and getting home, I got a call from the embassy. According to their explanation, Jack had returned from the restroom to find his mother, my mother-in-law, sitting alone. Despite being surprised that I was not there, he was livid. He tried to contact me but couldn't get through, so he decided to make his way to the hotel by himself. However, not knowing where to go, he was visibly flustered when a kind person spoke to him in broken English. He was led away after being told that they knew the place and would take him there, only to be robbed of all his money, passport, and valuables. My mother-in-law was even stripped of her jewelry. When he was found standing on the street looking destitute, the police picked him up and referred him to the embassy for help. That's how he was able to contact me. The embassy official asked me to come and pick him up. He couldn't withdraw money because his wallet, which contained his bank cards, had been stolen. However, I asked back why I, a stranger, had to do that. I explained that I was already divorced from the man who was there. The truth was I had kept the divorce papers he had thrown at me some time ago. Back then, I decided not to proceed with a divorce as I had heard it would be a lot of trouble. But this time I had reached my limit. After filling in the divorce papers, I headed to the hotel right after landing back in the States. To my surprise, the divorce was accepted without any fuss. I already had a new place lined up, and the contract had been signed while making the travel arrangements. I didn't want to use the furniture I had shared with Jack. It made my skin crawl. In my new place, I planned to buy everything new, so I packed for both the trip and the move at the same time. All I need to bring to the new place is my work tools and my favorite clothes. I could easily have everything else sent by courier at a specified date and time. The embassy staff did not ask anything more from me, and the conversation ended. Later, it seems my former mother-in-law had pleaded with my former father-in-law, and with his help, my ex-husband Jack and ex-mother-in-law were able to return to the States. However, Jack, who had blown his top, contacted me. "You left me and divorced me without my knowledge." "Abandoned? No, I just obeyed your mother's instructions to leave. If you have any complaints, talk to your mom. And please consider the business class flight I arranged for you on your return as my farewell gift." I also reminded him that he was the one who had first brought up the divorce papers. I only filed the divorce papers he had prepared, fulfilling his wish for a divorce. "Do you think such sophistry will work? How much more do you want to embarrass me?" "Embarrassed? How so?" "If you want to feel embarrassed, I have a better story. Want to hear it?" "What is it?" "Well, did you know you're a regular at an adult entertainment club? You're pretty invested in a favorite girl there, aren't you? Rather than contributing money to the household, you are heavily splurging on her. But you ended up in debt when her demands escalated, right? I had an investigation agency look into a debt collection letter addressed to Jack that had been delivered to our house. Although Jack was a good spender, his obsessive behavior seemed to be a turnoff. His favorite girl's true feelings were that she thought he would eventually stop coming if she kept asking for more money and expensive gifts. I wonder what Jack felt when he heard that. That's quite an embarrassing story, isn't it? If you make any more fuss or contact me again, I'll spill the beans to your company. Got it. Being disliked by the girl he was infatuated with would be an unbearable humiliation for Jack, considering his personality. If this became known, it would be a great embarrassment. Jack, who until now had been aggressive, just said, "Got it," in a feeble voice and ended the call. A few days later, my ex-father-in-law contacted me. He told me he had also divorced his wife, my ex-mother-in-law. I thought it was unnecessary as we were no longer related, but it seems he contacted me to expose my ex-mother-in-law's true nature, as we both have been treated poorly by her. My former father-in-law, suspicious of his wife's behavior, investigated while she was out and discovered that his retirement savings had been depleted. The money was apparently spent on beauty treatments and cosmetic procedures. As I'm not familiar with such things, I was totally unaware. When asked for a woman's perspective, I was stumped because I hadn't noticed it either. I guess seeing someone only once a year makes changes more noticeable, but I truly hadn't picked up on anything. I even asked my former father-in-law, "Are you sure it's for beauty treatments? She seems to have sunk quite a bit into it, but there's no visible change." Perhaps there were slight changes that only my former mother-in-law could notice. It felt like throwing money down the drain. Naturally, my former mother-in-law, who was kicked out penniless, turned to her son Jack. However, Jack, the backbone of the family, is up to his eyeballs in debt. After his divorce from me, he even lost his apartment for failing to pay the rent. Now he and his mother seem to be living in a drafty, run-down apartment, yet his mother has no intention of working and won't quit her beauty treatments. On top of repaying his debts, the burden of his mother's beauty expenses is weighing heavily on Jack, who I hear is working around the clock. It looks like the desire to appear larger than life doesn't fade, even when living standards drop. If they're happy with it, I'll keep quiet. But I've heard rumors that the beauty treatments aren't as good and she's aged a lot. As for me, I cherish the present moment when I can relax and improve my work without anyone dictating to me. It made me think again about living within my means.
The phone rang, slicing through the silence of my modest living room. I, Emily Townsend, a 38-year-old working mother, never expected that call to shatter the life I knew. "Emily, I'm leaving you. I've found someone else. Oh, and there's about $250,000 of debt in your name. Handle it, will you?" Michael's voice, once so familiar and comforting, was now cold, detached. My heart sank. This had to be a cruel joke. "Michael, what are you talking about?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper, but he was relentless. "You heard me. I'm with Claire now. She understands me, unlike you. Goodbye, Emily." And with that, he hung up. I stood there, phone still in hand, feeling as if the ground had been yanked from under me. Tears welled up in my eyes, not just for the betrayal, but for the sheer impossibility of the debt he'd saddled me with. "Mom, are you okay?" Anna, my 10-year-old daughter, walked in, her small face etched with concern. I forced a smile, masking my turmoil. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm fine." But Anna wasn't fooled. She hugged me, a gesture offering more comfort than she knew. After Anna went to bed, I sat alone, the weight of my new reality suffocating me. How could Michael do this to us? We had a life, a family, and now I was alone, buried under a mountain of debt I had no knowledge of. I logged into our online banking, hoping Michael's call was just a terrible mistake. My heart sank further as I saw the near-empty account. Michael had drained everything, leaving only a trail of unpaid bills and maxed-out credit cards. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I spent hours staring at the ceiling, grappling with the betrayal. Michael, the man I had loved and trusted, had turned my life into a nightmare. And the worst part, I had no idea how to wake up from it. Before the turmoil, there was a time when laughter filled our home. I met Michael at a charity event. He was charming, his smile infectious. I remember thinking how lucky I was when he asked me out. Those initial dates blossomed into a whirlwind romance. We were young, in love, and the world seemed full of possibilities. Our wedding was a modest affair, but it was perfect. Surrounded by close friends and family, I felt like the happiest woman in the world. When Anna was born 2 years later, our joy multiplied. She was our little miracle, a perfect blend of Michael and me. Those early years were filled with simple pleasures, picnics in the park, movie nights cuddled on the couch, and Anna's laughter echoing through our home. I often found myself marveling at our little family, feeling a sense of contentment I never thought possible. But as Anna grew, so did the distance between Michael and me. It started subtly, missed dinners, late nights at the office, and weekends consumed by urgent work calls. I tried to bridge the gap, arranging date nights and family outings, but Michael always had an excuse. Then came the job losses. Michael's excuses grew thin as he hopped from one job to another. With each new position, his demeanor darkened. The loving man I married was slowly replaced by a stranger, one who snapped at the slightest provocation and withdrew into himself. I remember one evening trying to discuss his job situation. His response still echoes in my mind. "What do you know about pressure, Emily? You just sit at home taking care of Anna. You don't understand what it's like in the real world." His words stung. I had given up my career to support his, to be there for Anna. Didn't that count for something? As Michael's behavior became increasingly erratic, I returned to the workforce. It wasn't just for financial stability. It was to fill the growing void in my heart. I missed the connection we once had, the sense that we were a team. Looking back, those signs were there, warning me of the storm that was about to hit. I just chose to ignore them, clinging to the memory of the man I fell in love with, hoping he would return. The unraveling of our life began with whispers of doubt and ended in a cacophony of betrayal. As Michael's job instability grew, so did the tension in our home. His once sporadic late nights became the norm. Each time he stumbled in, reeking of alcohol, a part of my heart crumbled. One evening, as I was putting Anna to bed, she asked, "Mommy, why is Daddy always mad?" Her innocent question pierced me. "Daddy's just tired from work, sweetie," I answered, though I knew the truth was far more complicated. The final straw came when I discovered a series of receipts for expensive jewelry and hotel stays. Confronting Michael led to a ferocious argument, the first of many. "You're suffocating me, Emily," he yelled. "I need some space, some freedom." "Freedom? Is that what you call spending our savings on whatever this is?" I countered, holding up the receipts. He snatched them from my hand, his eyes blazing. "You wouldn't understand. You're just a housewife. What do you know about living a life?" I stood there stunned as he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. His words, so callous and dismissive, echoed in my mind. Was this really the man I married? Determined to protect Anna and myself, I made the decision to return to work. My old job at the marketing firm welcomed me back, and I threw myself into it. The work was a welcome distraction from the chaos at home. Yet, as I worked late into the night, a gnawing feeling of guilt consumed me. I was missing precious moments with Anna, all because of Michael's selfishness. It wasn't fair. She didn't deserve this. The nights grew lonelier. Michael's presence in the house became like a ghost, there, but not really. His indifference towards Anna, his once cherished daughter, hurt the most. He was slipping away from us, and I felt powerless to stop it. It was during these dark times that I found solace in my friendship with Rachel. She became my confidant, my rock. "You're stronger than you know, Emily," she would often tell me. I wanted to believe her, but the shadows of doubt were overwhelming. As I lay in bed each night, listening to the silence of the house, I couldn't help but wonder where it all went wrong. When did the love and laughter turn into resentment and distance? The answers eluded me, much like the remnants of the happy life we once shared. Life, as I knew it, had become a juggling act. Balancing work, motherhood, and a crumbling marriage left me perpetually exhausted. Each day was a struggle to maintain a semblance of normalcy for Anna, who remained my beacon of hope. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, I found Anna sitting at the kitchen table, her homework spread out in front of her. "Mom, can you help me with this?" she asked, pointing to a math problem. I sat down, the fatigue of the day weighing heavily on me. "Of course, honey," I replied, but my mind was elsewhere, tangled in a web of bills, work deadlines, and the latest argument with Michael. As we worked through the problem, my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. "Emily, are you okay? You sounded off at work today." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "I'm just tired, Rachel. Tired of everything." Anna looked up at me, her eyes filled with concern. "Mom, you're working too hard. Can't Daddy help?" Her question was like a dagger to my heart. How could I explain to her that her father, the man who should have been our pillar, had become our greatest burden? Michael's presence in the house had become almost non-existent. When he was home, his disdain was palpable. Our interactions were limited to brief, bitter exchanges, often culminating in him storming out to spend the night God knows where. The climax of our deteriorating relationship came one rainy night. Michael arrived home late, his clothes drenched, his eyes wild. "I lost my job," he blurted out, a mix of anger and desperation in his voice. I stood there, stunned. "What happened?" "They're a bunch of idiots. They don't appreciate me," he spat, his voice laced with venom. I tried to reason with him, to discuss our next steps, but he was beyond reach. "You wouldn't understand, Emily. You live in this little bubble, thinking everything is fine. Well, it's not." His words hung in the air, a testament to the vast chasm that had grown between us. I realized then that the man I married, the man I loved, was gone. In his place stood a stranger, fueled by bitterness and regret. The following weeks were a blur. I worked tirelessly, my thoughts consumed by financial worries and the well-being of Anna. The strain took its toll, and my health began to falter. But I couldn't stop. Too much depended on me. Then, one fateful day at work, the world spun, and darkness engulfed me. I woke up in a hospital bed, Rachel and Anna by my side. The doctor's words were a wake-up call. "You need to slow down, Emily. Your body can't handle this stress." But how could I slow down? How could I, when our world was falling apart? Lying in the sterile hospital bed, a myriad of tubes and monitors attached to me, I couldn't help but feel defeated. The doctor's diagnosis was clear: stress-induced exhaustion, compounded by the early stages of an ulcer. But the real shock came when they found a small malignant lump in my breast. "Mom, you're going to be okay, right?" Anna's voice trembled with fear. I squeezed her hand, mustering a smile. "Of course, honey. Mommy's a fighter, remember?" Rachel, ever the supportive friend, was there too, her face etched with worry. "Emily, you need to take care of yourself. You can't keep going like this." I knew she was right, but the thought of slowing down, of letting Michael's irresponsibility win, was unbearable. Yet the reality of my health situation was a wake-up call. I had to be there for Anna. As I lay in the hospital processing my diagnosis, my phone rang. It was Michael. His voice was as cold and distant as ever. "Heard you're in the hospital. Bad timing, Emily. I need you to deal with some things." His callousness took my breath away. "Michael, I have cancer," I said, the words heavy on my tongue. There was a pause, and for a moment I thought I heard a hint of concern in his voice. But then he said, "Well, that's your problem. I have my own issues to deal with." I ended the call, a mix of anger and disbelief churning inside me. How could the man I once loved be so heartless? The next few days were a whirlwind of tests and consultations. Amidst it all, Rachel and Anna were my pillars, their love and support unwavering. But as I lay there, a plan began to form in my mind. Michael had left us in shambles, but I wouldn't let him destroy us. It was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. With Rachel's help, I started digging into our finances. The more I uncovered, the angrier I became. Michael had not only amassed a huge debt in my name, but had also been siphoning money from Anna's college fund. The final straw came when I discovered he'd taken out a second mortgage on our house without my knowledge. The depth of his deceit knew no bounds. "Rachel, we need to do something," I said, a newfound determination in my voice. Rachel nodded, her eyes fierce. "Don't worry, Emily. We'll make him pay for this. He won't get away with it." As I lay there, recovering, I knew one thing for sure. Michael had underestimated me. He thought he could break me, leave me to pick up the pieces of his mess. But he was wrong. I was going to fight back. Not just for me, but for Anna. And I would start by making Michael accountable for every single betrayal. The day I left the hospital marked the beginning of a new chapter. I was weak, physically and emotionally, but my resolve was stronger than ever. Armed with the evidence of Michael's financial treachery, Rachel and I devised a plan to confront him and bring his deceit to light. Rachel had been doing some digging of her own. Emily, you won't believe this. Michael's working at a tech startup now, and guess what? It's in the same building as my office. This was our chance. We decided to confront him there, in a public place where he couldn't avoid us. I wanted to see the look on his face when he realized he couldn't escape the consequences of his actions. The next day, with Anna safely at a friend's house, Rachel and I headed to Michael's workplace. My heart pounded as we entered the building. We found him in the lobby, chatting and laughing with a younger woman. The sight of him, so carefree, ignited a fire in me. "Michael," I called out, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He turned, his smile faltering as he saw me. The woman beside him, presumably Claire, looked on, puzzled. "What are you doing here, Emily?" Michael's voice was a mix of annoyance and surprise. I stepped forward, Rachel by my side. "We need to talk about the debts, the mortgage, and everything you've stolen from Anna and me." Michael glanced around nervously, aware of the curious eyes on us. "Not here, Emily. This isn't the place." "No, Michael, you don't get to decide that anymore," I said firmly. "You've left me with a mountain of debt, and I have cancer because of the stress you've caused. It's time you faced up to what you've done." Claire's eyes widened in shock. "Cancer? Michael, what is she talking about?" Michael's facade crumbled. He tried to usher Claire away, but she resisted. "No, I want to know what's going on. What debt?" I looked Claire in the eyes. "He's been using my name to take out loans, max out credit cards, even drained our daughter's college fund." Claire turned to Michael, betrayal etched on her face. "Is that true, Michael?" He had no words, just stood there, trapped in the web of his own lies. It was a small victory, but seeing him exposed for who he truly was in front of Claire and his colleagues gave me a sense of justice. As Rachel and I left the building, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The road ahead was still daunting, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the upper hand. Michael would no longer control our lives. It was time for him to pay for his actions, and I was just getting started. After the confrontation, our next step was legal action. Rachel, ever the resourceful one, connected me with a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer, Diane. She was a force to be reckoned with, and exactly what I needed. Diane pored over the documents I had gathered. "We have a strong case," she assured me. "Not only can we sue for the debts he incurred in your name, but we can also go after him for fraud and emotional distress." The idea of taking Michael to court was daunting, but it was necessary. He had to be held accountable. Meanwhile, Rachel kept an eye on Michael's movements. "He's unraveling, Emily. Claire left him, and it looks like his job is on the line, too." Good, I thought. He was finally feeling the weight of his actions. The day of the court hearing arrived. Michael was there, looking deflated, a far cry from the confident man he once was. As the proceedings began, it became clear that the evidence against him was overwhelming. Michael's lawyer tried to paint him as a man who had simply made some financial missteps, but Diane tore through their arguments. She presented the evidence of his fraudulent activities, his draining of Anna's college fund, and the impact of his actions on my health. The judge was sympathetic to our case. "Mr. Townsend, your actions have caused significant harm to your family. It's clear you acted with deceit and selfishness." The courtroom was silent as the judge delivered the verdict. Michael was found liable for the debts and ordered to pay restitution. Additionally, he would face criminal charges for his fraudulent activities. As we left the courtroom, Michael tried to approach me. "Emily, I'm sorry." I looked at him, feeling a sense of closure. "Your apologies mean nothing now, Michael. You're going to face the consequences of what you've done." Walking out of that courtroom, I felt a sense of empowerment. It wasn't just about the legal victory. It was about standing up to the man who had tried to break me. I had fought back and won. The battle was over, but the war was not. There were still challenges ahead: my health, rebuilding my life, ensuring Anna's future. But I faced them with a newfound strength. Michael Townsend would no longer cast a shadow over our lives. It was time for Anna and me to step into the light. The aftermath of the trial marked the beginning of a new life for Anna and me. The victory in court was more than just a legal triumph. It was a reclaiming of our dignity and strength. Yet, the true battle lay in rebuilding our lives from the ruins Michael had left behind. I returned to work with a renewed focus, determined to provide a stable and loving home for Anna. She was flourishing in school, her resilience a constant source of pride for me. We had weathered the storm together, and our bond had only grown stronger. Rachel was a regular visitor, always bringing warmth and laughter into our home. "You know, Emily, you're an inspiration," she said to me one evening as we sat in my living room, a sense of peace finally settling around us. I smiled, looking over at Anna, who was engrossed in a book. "I had a good teacher," I replied, my eyes meeting Rachel's. We had been through so much, but her friendship had been a guiding light through the darkest times. As for Michael, his downfall was swift. The loss of his job and reputation, coupled with the legal repercussions, had taken their toll. He tried to reach out a few times, perhaps seeking forgiveness or pity, but I had closed that chapter of my life. I was no longer the woman he had left in shambles. I was stronger, wiser, and free from his toxic presence. The journey wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt and fear, but each step forward was a testament to our resilience. Anna and I had not just survived. We had thrived. One evening, as I tucked Anna into bed, she looked up at me with those big, bright eyes. "Mom, we're going to be okay, right?" I nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be more than okay. We have each other, and that's all we need." As I turned off the light and left her room, I felt a sense of contentment. Our future was uncertain, but it was ours to shape. The scars of the past would always be there, but they no longer defined us. In the quiet of the night, I sat by the window, gazing at the stars. Life had thrown us into turmoil, but we had emerged stronger. We had faced our challenges head-on and reclaimed our lives. This was our new dawn, a time of healing and hope. And as I looked up at the night sky, I knew that no matter what lay ahead, Anna and I would face it together, with courage, love, and an unbreakable spirit.